Hello and welcome to Jason Cavness Experience. I'm your host, Jason Cavness. Before we dive in, a quick note about Cavness HR. At Cavness HR, we're building an AI native HR system designed for small business owners. So small business owners can spend less time on HR and more time growing their company. If you believe small business deserves better tools, you can invest in Cavness HR through our refunder campaign at refunder.com/CavnessHR. And if you want to learn from the 300 plus founders I've interviewed, grab our 7 free ebooks based on the Jason Cavness experience, full of leadership lessons, startup insights, and real stories from people who's building what's next. You can learn more about the refunder and the ebooks by clicking the QR codes on the screen. Our guest today is Andrea Suarez. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
So always try to start like, well, hopefully it's like a softball question. Can you tell us, and we're going to talk about all the stuff you're doing now in the past and the future, but for now, how do you take care of yourself?
How do I take care of myself personally? I live here in Belltown and downtown work, play, and live. And I'm a proud member of the Washington Athletic Club. We're the first nonprofit that's enrolled in their wellness package. So I'm there often, hitting the gym, and being in community is actually probably my biggest survival technique. Is I've got a team of volunteers. We go out, we pick trash, we share stories, we help people get off the streets, and that's just a very rewarding mental place to be as well, and with that purpose.
So talk about how, like, first of all, like Reheart Seattle, why that name?
Well, I've been in King County since 1997, more than half my life, and moved to Seattle in 2009. And bought a condo right here on First Avenue. And I love Seattle. I love this city so much. World-class city, sports, beauty, indoors, outdoors, theater arts, restaurants, walkability. And it's just a beautiful Pacific Northwest community. And during the pandemic, I was walking down 3rd and Pine, that 3 and P near McStabby's. And I broke down. I cried. I called my mom. I called my best friends. I said, wow, Seattle really needs some love. There was no tourism camouflaging kind of what was happening, which was the drug epidemic. People were languishing on the streets. There wasn't, people weren't out. And so for me, the silver lining of the pandemic was the next day we started what's now We Heart Seattle, a 5-year mission where we set out to make a more beautiful and safe Seattle for all to enjoy by picking up the garbage and using the resources in the city to help us. And during the pandemic, it was really apparent that volunteerism was a necessary gap to do so. And today we call it not just a mission, but a movement for civic engagement.
And so you moved here in 1997?
Into King County.
So let me ask you this, right? So I was in the military, and me and my family moved down to DuPont, Washington, July 2009. And right after that, some relatives came to visit, right? And so I took them to Seattle Pike Place Market back in 2009. And we walked into Pike Place Market, and people doing open drug deals, right? Mm-hmm. And so my question to you is like, I always say this term, back when Seattle was nice. I guess it means back when there's no homeless, no drugs. When was Seattle ever nice?
I mean, I hear that actually a lot too, Jason. Back in the 90s, used to be. And I mean, I think every big city has an element of grit and urban, grittiness, drugs, social services sort of bring people in that have a lot of vulnerabilities, people who need those services desperately, and that's okay. But for me, having lived here in 2009, about the same time you had made your first trips from the market, my eyes only looked up. I always saw the beauty, the market, the mountains, the whales, the sound. At the time I moved here, the Mariners 25 years ago were back on their wave. I was younger. I was a socialite. I traveled. I don't have children. I really wasn't looking at the streets, at that level. I never stayed home long enough to, see or maybe have such a broken heart of what was going on. Maybe I thought it was a blip here or a blip there. But again, the silver lining of the pandemic for me is I was home every day, every hour of every day. I was seeing the open air use of drugs, overdose, squalid living conditions, unequitable access to parks. And so I do believe that we've always had homelessness and drug addiction and mental illness in our society, of course, but there was a surge, a visible surge, whether perceived or otherwise, during the pandemic. And for me, I attribute that personally because I stayed home long enough to see it, and there wasn't anybody else out and about to camouflage it.
So let me ask you this, right? I think a big problem is like a lot of people get desensitized to stuff, right? For example, you didn't see him, but usually there's a post office next door where I work at, and there's a gentleman down there, right? And I have no idea it's true, but 3 or 4 people told me that he's been there like for 12 years, right? And like they even said like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, his granddaughter came and got him. He didn't want to go. The police made him go to the granddaughter. The granddaughter took him away. He was back in 3 months, right? So like, what can you even do in those cases, right? I mean, you want to help him, but still, like, he's made decisions to live there, right?
So you're getting right to the belly of the beast, which I like to talk about what the mundane act of picking up the trash 5 years ago, needles, drug paraphernalia. Grimly, we've found 12 bodies in the work, in tents and RVs, cars, bones in shanty tent structures in the greenbelts. Learned a lot about homelessness and why people are there, or why they're, in the case of your example, service resistant. These kind of repeat offenders, whether it's criminal driven or repeat people who don't stay in behavioral health centers, and just don't want help. They are sort of chronically homeless is the term. Because of Western State Hospital being decertified many years ago, there is a lot more people that sort of are out in the streets. I know many people that were kind of
Is Western State the only hospital like that in the state of Washington?
There's Eastern State, okay. Washington State. They need to be recertified. I've never stepped foot into any of them.
But you hear the horror stories, right? When I got in 2009, I heard all the horror stories about Western State.
Yeah, I mean, I think goes back to the sane asylums and what happened during the 80s, and was that why we have so many people on our streets. And there's my mantra is, if I didn't see it for my own eyes, I have a really hard time believing it happened. That's why I'm very proud that I have my opinions, because of my own boots on the ground, 45,000 hours of volunteer work, empirical data, learning by doing. My education comes from the dirt under my fingernails and in the boots that I've broken in, that, what is the root cause of the homeless population, whether it's broken relationships, mental illness, drug addiction, or all of the above, right? There's this element of affordable housing and the element of an expensive place to live. But in the case of the person you're speaking of, I mean, there's just a population of people that will be service resistant. And under a law passed by a very progressive legislator by the name of Lauren Davis in 2018, Ricky's law and Joel's law, my little brother's been hospitalized 5 times for his psychotic breaks, who is housed. So there are means to take somebody against their will and hospitalize them because they're a grave danger to themselves or others. As a society, we've become very loose on what it means to be a grave danger to yourself. I've very recently started taking a position. Of course, I've always said publicly, if you're on fentanyl, you're a grave danger to yourself. If you're on fentanyl and refusing service, you're like super a grave danger to yourself. Then you add, you're a senior citizen or you're a veteran with PTSD. What is a grave danger to yourself and others? I'm at the point where if you're not accepting shelter, a very basic need, you're a grave danger to yourself. You'll get frostbite. You could get mugged. You could get raped. You could get all the things that happen when you're outdoors. So I think that involuntary commitment is a missing piece of the puzzle. And I know it's not very popular, certainly in this county.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you. Right? I mean, it has to be somewhere like, I know some people will say, well, you can't take them off the street because that's taking their freedom away and the whatever, but like, are they really free? I mean, there are the elements. There are, like you say, possible muggings and stuff. I just know this. I think it's a fine line, right?
For sure. And the civil liberties of one shouldn't take the civil liberties away of the rest of the population who feel, and it's unfair to say, back in the day we called him, Freddie the freeloader or the hobo with his bag, that I'm just that guy that's pushing the shopping cart through town. That's not what we're talking about anymore. Fentanyl really changed the game, and again, I just, as a social worker on the ground, I see the suffering of people who've been out there years now. I know them by name. I can see the deterioration of couples, which we can talk about. Like, codependency is a major barrier for people to accept services. They don't want to split up from their use partner, a pet, a community, that all work in community. One person scores the dope, the other one steals for the dope, the other one's there for you to use the dope to make sure you don't die, the other one's carrying the Narcan, the other one's staying at the camp to make sure you don't get mugged. And so that's why you kind of see these camps move around in groups. But yeah, by and large, we're underutilizing. Again, it was passed by a far left progressive legislator by the name of Lauren Davis, because she lost her friend Ricky to an overdose. And that prompted her to create legislation that allowed everyday citizens, you and I, if we had a regular person out here on First and Main that seemed to be a grave danger to themselves or others, we could call the designated crisis line and report somebody, that we could start a file to have them detained. And there's places like Valley Cities, University of Washington, the Crisis Connection Center in Kirkland. There are places for people to go.
So, like, I've never done fentanyl. I never plan to do fentanyl. Like, I've done drugs in the past, but like, what do you think about fentanyl that people are so like want to use it, right? For example, a while ago, I went downstairs to go get something to eat, right? So I went to the store, and right in the front of the front door, a guy was scratching his leg, right?
Yeah.
And so I left. I went to his coffee. I came back 30 minutes later. He was still scratching his leg, and blood was just gushing out, right? I'm like, I never want to get that high, right? Like, what do you think it is about fentanyl that's like so addictive?
Well, it's 50 times stronger than heroin. It's cheaper than heroin. It isn't opioid, so it's euphoric. It takes away your physical pain. It takes away your mental pain. And it's highly addictive, so you can't go far before needing another hit. It's why a lot of people are kind of populating around maybe a housing project or a particular RV, staying very close to where they can find their dealer. In the case of these people who, you start to get open wounds, it's the precursors, the contaminants. People will say bad batch. Everybody's taken off their shoes and socks because there's tranq in the drug now, which is a horse tranquilizer. And all of this sort of clandestine lab-made drugs makes you crazy, and now most opioid addicts using fentanyl, it's so strong and you need it so often and it knocks you out so hard that people are now having to use meth, amphetamine, and fentanyl together. And what's happening, that's why you saw surges in overdoses, is you just can't tell how much is in it, and why using alone is really a fast track to an overdose.
All right, so let's change subject for fast. So last year you ran for office, correct?
Yes, I did.
Now, did you run for office to help advance Reheart Seattle, or just to be civically engaged? What was the reason behind running?
Sure. So last May of 2024, I ran for State House for the 43rd District. I am a twice elected precinct committee officer for the Dems of the 43rd legislative district. So I've been on the ballot. I've been elected twice to do that, although I'm passive in my role, admittedly, because my colleagues there, to be blunt, had priorly been very verbally abusive towards me. And I have had to tell the leadership that, I don't want to be a part of that ecosystem where if you're not ride or die on the progressive agenda, you're cast away as being almost MAGA. There's a lot of rumors out there that you're not really a Democrat. You're not really, and we can get into that later. But the reason why I ran, I believe anybody that starts a nonprofit has their mission, and then often do get into lobbying or run for office to realize their mission, to be able to take it to the next level and have an influence on policy at the state level, to be an influencer around things like, as example, we talked about Ricky's Law. We need to have those designated crisis responders under the city's control, not the county's control. So like little things like handing out crack pipes and foil, I think that should be defunded. We should not be enabling addiction. I mean, these are like kind of low barrier ways that we could change the culture from drug friendly, come here to use drugs, to we are more of a recovery first community and aren't handing out that kind of paraphernalia. I also was asked to run because my opponent didn't have a challenger at the time, and I happened to be at a mixer, and I think this is kind of how life generally happens. some things are not always well planned out, but I happened to be at a mixer, and people were like, we need somebody that lives in the 43rd. And like 150 people looked at me and went, Andrea, don't you live in Belltown? And I went, yeah. And then that night I filed against Sean Scott, who's a avowed Democratic Socialist Party member. You know, he's the defund the cops. He's let everybody out of jail. He's anti-park. He's anti-institution. He's studied Marxism. He's pro-political violence. He's gone on record to, you know, I mean, he has, you know, he won the race. He was endorsed by the Democratic Party, which you're seeing today in New York. You're seeing it here with Katie Wilson in Seattle, that the Democratic Party has really moved to a Democratic Socialist Party in various corners of our country.
Now, in your ex, you recently made some comments about your former opponent, right?
Mhm.
Like, can you talk about those?
So Sean Scott was, I don't want to use the word groomed. That's a terrible word. Sean Scott was courted by Frank Chop, rest in peace. He passed away this last year, who held the position for 30 years. I mean, talk about a one-party rule, one opinion rule in our state government. So Sean was he was networked, he was down there, he was being trained. He works for Solid Ground, which is a housing project that Frank Chop helped mastermind. Frank Chop is the mastermind behind what we now call the Homeless Inc. Space. Lots of housing, lots of billions, not a lot of improvement on what homelessness looks like today, certainly not from a visible street standpoint. But he is a socialist. He believes in, you know, and he believes in an ideology of social, you know, anarchism, socialism, anarcho-socialism, which is very hands-off, live and let live. You know, we're on, you know, we need to break down these institutions that represent and created systemic poverty and racism and all that, perhaps true, but it is a revolution to think that we're going to dismantle the United States of America as being a pro-capitalistic country to one, what we're starting to see, you know, in New York, where the government pays for grocery stores and cops are all bad, and you know, that kind of flavor of activism that is now we're seeing turned violent. And again, Sean Scott has gone on record, my opponent at the time, to say that, you know, how do we help protesters at at the UW campus that were creating millions of dollars of damage. So he seems to be for the destruction and the demonstrations at all costs for, again, the revolution. He has now been fined something like $12,000 for campaign finance violations. He has another fine for misconduct and unethical use of his public social media platform, blocking constituents and blocking media. So he's a little troublemaker. He's not all up to par with ethics and that. So it's a little disappointing that he unfortunately.
So do you plan on running again for not this one or maybe another political office?
I think politics. I mean, I've considered myself a civic leader, a civic servant. I'm a Rotarian. I'm a proud Paul Harris Fellow. I was Rotarian of the Year in 2023. I believe in service above self. That whether I'm elected or not, I feel very politically operative and plugged in. I love being a private funded gap filler. I just wish I had a more of a handshake with my electeds. I think I just got out of a lunch with Council Chair Girmay and Teresa Mosquedos, and was able to say, I'm here, but I probably wouldn't go into a lawmaker position. I think my sights are more like in a mayoral race.
Okay. And so I saw somewhere where you made a statement that you're a real Democrat. What does that mean, you're a real Democrat?
Well, Democrats are fiscally conservative. Democrats are for the people. Democrats are for taxes to serve people in need and to have social services and to have good governance. And I call that strong Democratic, old school, pragmatic, common sense, help the needy, and social justice for all, pro-choice, pro-productive rights, pro-immigration, done, the right way. And I know that's a very controversial topic right now. I think the course correction that we're doing is I'm watching how it's folding out. I'm probably not going to take any kind of a position on that. My ex-husband is Canadian. It was the biggest pain in the ass thing I've ever done in my life to get him a green card and to get him nationalized. And like, I know what that looks like. And I know it would be absolutely impossible to do for people that didn't have the means to take flights and to get out of work, to go to appointments and to collect paperwork. It's very, very, very hard to live and work in the United States. So we need to make that easier. And I digress. But you know what? I'm for moderates. I like moderation on both sides, right? And I talk to everybody, and it seems to be that the Democrats, at least in Washington, don't want you to talk to a Republican at all. And I don't think that's being democratic. Democratic means debate for better outcomes. We work together, civil discourse. I don't like when I'm seeing, on both sides where it's getting further, ride or die on the issues. We have to make compromise and talk to each other for better outcomes. And so I proudly have a nonpartisan movement. We have all walks of life that we work with. I proudly host Democrats that come out and litter pick. I proudly host members of the GOP that come out and litter pick. I've done ride-alongs for Mark Mullet, who's a Democrat running for mayor in Issaquah when he was running for governor a couple years ago. We're an open book, and I was telling my mom the other day, even growing up, I played sports, but I loved sneaking out to the keggers. I hung out with the stoners. I was a prep, but I also would go out on Halloween and the goths, and we would look at bats in the trees and make up like ghost town stories. And I've dated all kinds of walks of life. I have friends of all walks of life. I'm pro all of the, again, civil rights, but I also am balanced where I think that there are things that have gone too far, and that puts pretty much an old school Democrat. My mom's 78. She was, born San Francisco, California, and she's like, this is crazy. Things like biological boys and girls sports casts me out of the Democratic Party. Those are very controversial issues, and and I don't publicly necessarily take a stance and run my platform for picking up trash and helping people with drug addiction, but it comes into play because of these type of conversations and like kind of where I stand on some of the issues. So I don't mind sharing them.
Yeah, I think the thing with the far left, far right, they're both doing the same thing. They're like, either you're with us or you're not with us, right? Like, people don't realize, like, Joe Rogan, Elon Musk, they were all like liberals. I mean, they still all liberals. Joe Rogan will tell you, like,
Michael Schellenberger.
Yeah, Joe will tell you, I like guns. I don't believe guys should be in female sports. He said everything else. He'll say, I'm a borderline socialist, right? But yet, he was pushed out. Elon Musk was pushed out, right?
Yeah.
I just don't get it, right? And then, like me, I think, for example, like Bill Maher. To me, Bill Maher is a stereotypical liberal, right?
Yep.
He's on the radio for every day, like, blasting what they're doing, right? But yet, this far left progressive is like taking over the Democratic Party. And
yeah, Bill Maher is kind of saved the day for a lot of Democrats, I think, and well, I should say liberals, to come out and say, yeah, this has gone too far. We're canceling each other. We've canceled accountability. It's this hands-off, lenient, anti-break the cycle of whether it's crime or addiction, because that's sort of anti-anarchism, which is, element of the socialist. I mean, socialist, gosh, I pick garbage. I am an anarchist in the sense, I'm doing mutual aid. I'm doing it without government. It's privately funded. We all work together. We're kind of egalitarian. I think we should have free garbage for all. Like, there are things on both sides that, garbage of all things. Why do we have to pay for garbage? Like, let's all put in the kitty together, and maybe we won't have illegal dumping, for example.
Think about fire department is socialism, right?
Right. Yeah. School, roads, policing, all these things we put into so we can coexist, of course, is socialism. And so that's like how these different isms have been fractioned out into meaning, like ideology is gone radical. It's a radicalized point of view. And there's other public figures like Michael Schellenberger, also, he was like the, bra burning, he was a Berkeley Berkeley guy, still lives in Berkeley, down in the Congo in college, trying to fight climate change and just doing all the things. And now he's a very controversial contrarian to say, maybe all these things aren't exactly, maybe too came from the academics. And I think there's a big tie to a lot of what we do because it was the academic said so of the day. And so we're going to do harm reduction, or we're going to do housing first, or we have this climate crisis, or we have the bald eagle was going to come extinct. I mean, I thought I was going to jump off the ledge when I was an 8th grader, and like all these whales and birds and we're going to become extinct. They scare us. Climate change scares people. Like everything's melting and sun's going to burn out, and it's scary. Sometimes people come out with that hysteria. It's not all catastrophic, I think.
No, like a lot of times people will say, oh, it's such a bad time, it's horrible, whatever, it's the worst case to live ever. Of course, there's bad things, but we would live today on the year 1721, where there's no hot water, no electricity, no toilets, right? Diseases everywhere. I don't know. I think we're living the best time possible right now.
For sure. And I want to quote him softly, but I think it was a few years ago, probably during sort of that civil unrest after civil unrest after civil unrest, up and around Floyd and even pre-pandemic. And maybe I probably was more actually 20 years ago when he was talking about 9/11. And this was a quote from Bill Gates where he's like, we are in the most peaceful time in history of the world, but it feels like there's assassinations and school shootings and, stabbings on buses and double homicides in our parks related to homelessness and drug turf and sex trafficking and gun shootouts over pimp turf war. Like you hear all that, and maybe it's an element of social media and what we see and hear differently and how we absorb media. But it really is the most peaceful time that we've ever lived. I think that still holds true.
Yeah. So Seattle, they're doing their mayor election, I think, next week. You have one guy, Bruce Harrell. He's been in the government for like a few years, I think 10, 20 years. Like I would consider maybe like
council member. He's sat on the council for 12 years. He was council president for 4, took a couple year break. Yeah, like a little stint mayor, and then he took a little stint off, and then he reran for mayor 4 years ago. And
so if you say conservatives like is a 1, liberals 10, I would consider him like maybe a 6.5. And he's running against a lady named Katie Wilson. I would probably consider 10 plus, right? So question to you is like, does it even matter who wins with all this stuff going on? Like, is the policy, nothing's going to really change? They're both going to do the same kind of policies, except Katie may be more extreme.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, and it will actually help me sleep at night no matter what, because the reason why I started We Heart Seattle is I did actually call every government agency, garbage, parks, S.W. The alleyways, the recycle companies, the downtown Seattle associations, like who picks up the needles? Why are our parks overtaken with camps? They're on fire, 911. And when I realized that the government moves very slow, and your question, Jason, being, does it matter who really wins mayor? And I believe while we've made so much progress in the last 4 years, I attribute it a lot to We Heart Seattle and the influence we had in maybe turning out a few more votes for a moderate council. For example, we flipped in 2022, right? We got Kettle and Nelson and Hollingsworth and Moore and Maritza Rivera. So there was that era, and Harrell got then elected, and things have gotten better, but government has built to be very slow. And so for that, I say things would probably move faster if Harrell got reelected. But I believe if Katie gets elected, it's just going to come to a screeching halt. No progress will be made because she's new. She has such a big learning curve. And how I'll sleep at night, I am more for moderates. I'll take my We Heart hat off and say that, moderate politicians are more in alignment with my mission for clean and safe Seattle for all to enjoy. So your listeners can read below the lines there who I'll be voting for. But I had great peace when I lost my race to Sean Scott, that I have this platform that's privately funded that gets to go out every day and lend a helping hand to somebody in need. And I can bend over and pick up trash without the government. And it's the most rewarding, freeing feeling when you realize maybe the government isn't the answer to our day-to-day lives. And also why voting for your backyard legislators and council members and school board are so important. But also, I just want to emphasize the real importance is how you involve in your community programs. Rotary, school board, parent classes, things like that is how you really get the backyard that you want to live.
I don't think people realize, like, everyone, the presidential election, governor elect, others, but really, to me, the more important ones are the local ones, the city council, the school district, right?
100%.
And of course, those, like, if there's a presidential election, we're lucky 40% of the population votes. Local, we're luckily a 10% vote.
Well, yeah, that is a voter crisis we've had for a century, rather. And I wonder what would it look like if everybody voted. We would be very, very centered, if not center right, if everybody got out and voted.
Yeah.
And we would probably have very little divide, and we could maybe actually talk about politics a little bit more, or no need to, kind of be more Switzerland or Canada with a 5-party. I'll give a shout out to my friend, co-founder of Nirvana, Chris Novoselic, worldwide famous bassist and our hometown hero. He's founded the Cascade Party, which is that old school liberal that, still probably has a couple guns at home, believes in all boats rise together, but common sense, law and order, access to parks, clean streets, moderate, pragmatic values. And so if you are out there listening and you want a third party option, the Cascade Party is looking for volunteers.
Nice. So back to Far Left real quick. It just amazes me how they eat their own. Like, I'm guessing you know who Billie Eilish is, right?
Yeah.
So she's like Black Lives Matter, all that kind of stuff, right? I'm like all in, right? George Floyd or whatever. And so she's Irish. And you might have heard of this. So she's doing a world tour, and she's Irish, never been to Ireland. And so she did a tour in Dublin, Ireland, right? And while there, she made a statement, "I'm so happy here to be with my people." And she got blasted by the left. "What do you mean your people, blah, blah, blah?" And they try to cancel, like, man, this lady is on your side. Like, she's ride or die for you. And because she said she was happy to be around her, basically her genetical people, right? You want us to cancel her, right?
Yeah, there is definitely to each your own. I mean, God, there was an example the other day. I mean, if her policies are, for politics are left, of what maybe Irish folks predominantly are believing, and she's said something like that. I barely heard that story, but I can tell you for myself, this, like, eat your own. I mean, gosh, I have had some friends like, oh, well, you're no longer quite enough of a liberal for me, or or you're rolling with so and so, and I saw him rolling with the Christians. Well, okay, when did we not become affiliated with anybody that affiliated differently with you in all elements? I always say when you go to a restaurant and it's a Greek restaurant and you really love lamb but you don't like eggplant, you don't order the eggplant. You just say, I don't like eggplant. I like lamb, and I like hummus, and I like garbanzo beans, and I like all those things. But you don't say, fuck that restaurant, man. They had fucking eggplant on it. Cancel them. Rawr, break their windows. How dare they? And that eggplant was grown by a Catholic Christian, bigot, because, they also liked, something that they liked literally something on Facebook that was from a Republican who's, they throw, it's just like, stop.
Isn't that crazy? Like, you like a post on Twitter, like X, like 10 years ago, and they bring it back on you. It's just insanity to me.
Yeah. When I ran for office, it was like, oh, Andrea got a parking ticket and said she was, doing an emergency run for somebody who was a homeless crisis situation, or Andrea, got into a fight with her boyfriend New Year's Eve, 25 years ago at midnight and went to jail for it. It's like, it's all like dig. It's like, find me a perfect human being, but there's nothing more courageous than throwing your hat in the ring and running for race, because everything gets exposed, your finances, your background, all that. And that's, I think, why people don't run and they don't vote. They don't want the drama.
I mean, politics is so dirty, right? So I have a friend that she ran for city council in DuPont, Washington, like a long time ago, right? She's a Korean American Air Force veteran, and she got divorced like maybe 10 years ago, right? Someone called her ex-husband and said, "Is there any dirt you can give on her?"
Yeah.
And it's a city council person race, and the town has 10,000 people.
Yeah, no, my ex-boyfriend from 26 years ago was called, and then I ran into him like a couple months later. My brother's winery, we happened to actually still sort of be friends. And he's like, "Andrea, someone's got to say what you say. I'm really proud of you." And he goes, "By the way, your opponent's and the stranger, somebody called me to try to get me to testify about our skerfuffle, midnight, both drinking, little push in the kitchen, cops get called, one of us gets hauled to jail, happened to be me, and it's like, okay.
It's like, really? I mean, I don't know.
But yeah, they call and dig. I got docs.
And that's why people don't want to run, right?
Yeah, I have a whole, like my employer at the time, I was with DHL Global Logistics for 25 years. Have everything I have in my life, was fortunate to have a very good career.
And you retired from DHL?
I kind of soft retired when I started this, and then I ran for office, and my numbers kind of dropped, and then they kind of came back up, and then they're like, "Andrea, we're laying off people, and you you made the cut, or you didn't make the cut." And I was like, "I get it, I'm out," But I was a very good career. Everything was on good terms. And
what did you do for them again?
I worked for a startup as a general manager, and then that company got bought out, and I went into sales. And so I was by and large an outside sales person that sold direct to consumer small parcels. So if you went online to buy this little glass, it would ship into your mailbox. I was the provider that sold you the shipping and the label and handled your "where's my package" calls.
Okay, so despite all the negative going on politics, right? Would you say it's still important for people to be civically engaged, and how can we influence if people would be more civically engaged?
Well, I love that question. How do you vote for the backyard you want to live? I mean, right? We only vote once a year, every 4 years. People have dismissed the power of your local municipalities, council, mayor. We talked about that already. And my call to action is volunteer. Find a local organization like Rotary, like your food bank, like your church feeding, like your Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, youth centers, community centers, YMCA. Find a nonprofit that speaks to you and get out and serve. I like We Heart Seattle. We just launched We Heart Olympia. We've at one point we ran a 90-day proof of concept in Portland. That is a direct action, right? So when we talk about direct action, what does that mean? Well, people talk a lot about Antifa and rioters. Well, their action is to destroy and to vandalize and to break windows and to throw firecrackers at people, like literally blow up cop cars during the George Floyd protest downtown Seattle in 2020, right? That's a direct action. My direct action is to organize litter picks. Every single week we go out into the woods, into the parks with dozens of people, and we pick up trash. And that mundane act allows you to be in community for a common cause. And you might just transform a life by doing that. So go to serve.org. Volunteering can mean a lot of things for a lot of different people. Maybe your secret superpower is web design. Find out if a nonprofit needs somebody to have a facelift for their website, or you're a finance guy and somebody needs a pro bono accountant. I have a pro bono attorney that helps out We Heart Seattle. So don't think like, "Oh, gross, I don't like trash." Think about what is your superpower and your God-given gift. Your podcast, Jason, is a direct action, right? To help get out messages and bring awareness to headline conversations. And so thank you for doing this, because it helps educate, it helps bring inspiration and hope back to communities. That the best way you can make a difference is absolutely vote, but also get out and find that, humane society. People love animals, can be whatever it is that individual person's passion.
So back to Antifa real fast. Did you see where Jimmy Kimmel on her show said Antifa does not exist?
Hold on one second. Let me take a sip of this water.
I really?
Well, this is a 3-hour conversation in and itself. So Antifa means anti-fascist, right? Of course. Who's pro-fascism? I'm not. But it's sort of like calling people a patriot, that means, you're this conservative, flag waving, big truck driving, gun toting. Like somehow we've really even kind of hijacked that a patriot is this ultra proud boy, right? And then over here, you've got, which of course that's so dumb. We're all patriots. We vote. We love America. Then you've got this kind of what we're calling this far left constituent base, and it's been branded as Antifa because they think everything is fascist. They think parks are fascist. Anything that's a institution, an organization, something that's branded or capitalized, just because I have a brand, a website, and I've grown, even though I'm private funded, I'm a fascist. I'm the Nazi. I'm the one that's using, quote, my power and authority and leadership to help another person that maybe I see beneath me, which is insane. That's not how I approach my work. But there's the element that this faction of people, which is a faction of anarchism, which are now branding themselves. And I mean, they've pushed me into traffic and I said, where's the cops? And they went, there are no cops, Andrea, you are in Antifa land. So they're branding themselves as Antifa. But don't take that away from me, that as though I'm pro-fascism. But so it's important to kind of understand that these labels mean something to somebody, and they're widely used for propaganda purposes. How do I know that this Antifa exists, quote unquote, is by way of, well, they label themselves that way. They have stickers, they have mantras, they have direct actions that they do to protest ICE or protest cops or protest Christian rallies or protest me. I mean, can you believe it? I've had these black bloc wearing helmet, mask, bear spray mask, brass knuckle glove wearing people come to my litter picks. This has been a while, but they started out saying, well, who are you to say how you know how to help the homeless? And they linked arms and tried to block me from helping the homeless because I was approaching it with more accountability. And they don't like accountability, or pardon me, they don't like empowerment. When you use words that sound superior, oh, empowerment, that's a naughty word because like you're trying to get them to do something for something. And that's when my day of destiny happened with them, where I knew they were a real organization or a real ism, a real ideology that parks are on stolen land, homeless can stay wherever they want, live and let live. Nobody comes to your house, Jason, and says, do you need help with your garbage? Like, I don't knock on your door and say, hey, dude, I think you need a couple garbage bags. Why is there drug paraphernalia all over here? They were trying to make it sound like I was literally knocking on some suburban home in a cul-de-sac, asking them if they want garbage and dental work. So it was very bizarre. How is the Homeless Inc. funding Antifa? This is a very hot headline right now, sweeping the nation. They're funding them not through paycheck, but through ideology. They're using their platforms as incubation tanks to perpetuate the revolution. How do they do that? If you go into many, many, many of the nonprofits, and I've seen it for more than probably almost 10 years now, because I started seeing it even before We Heart. It's when you go into a food distribution center and their entire boardroom has training materials on how to identify a white supremacist. I'm like, I thought you guys distributed pears, right? So they're using their nonprofit, and we should all be identifying white supremacists, don't get me wrong. But then and there's more genders than there are stars. And here's how you can get involved for maybe this piece of lobbying, like, allowing boys and girls sports. They're being used to fight the revolution. And it's been something I've seen, and why they don't like what I'm doing, because I'm poking my nose into a place and I'm a tattletale. I'm like, hey, why aren't you guys doing anything about helping this homeless person actually reach self-sufficiency? Well, they don't believe in self-sufficiency. They don't believe it should be upon me or anybody to say, I don't think you should do drugs. Instead, we're saying, here's the methamphetamine pipe and the foil to do the drugs together that will kill you, because you're a drug addict and you're a person too. And so it's just all of this like ideology that's anti-structure, anti-authority, anti-leader, anti-brand. And they're using the nonprofit space to, again, help realize their mission, which is a stateless society.
Is there anything out there like a website or anything that says, this person is the director of Antifa, this person is involved, or anything like that?
No, because that's the antithesis of their ism, which is there is no leader. There is no in charge. So it infiltrates in a lot of different ways. Like there's this thing called ads. I'd have to look at it again. Let me see if I can find it. But see if I can find. There are websites that sell material like how to protest violently and not get caught, how to buy the stickers that say, no guilty when masked, because like when I was attacked with people who had masks on, I reported it to the police. The investigator called me and said, well, we don't know who they are. So sorry, you got assaulted, but there's nothing we can do. So it infiltrates through bookstores. It infiltrates through nonprofits. Different mutual aid groups have website. It's called Adbusters, Adbusters Media Foundation. So you would go to adbusters.org, and in Adbusters, it's all the instructions of how to, protest, how to be an anarchist, T-shirts, so there's these kind of fringe websites that have stuff like that. And that's what makes it for interesting conversations. Like, is it real? It's sort of.
Yeah, I'm off of protests and stuff.
Yeah.
But then I saw one time I happened to look at a wall, whatever, had a sign there, get paid to protest, $30 an hour, right? I said, well, I had no idea people got paid to protest, right? And it kind of fucked me up, right? Like, so these people, are they really protest and believe in the cause? They doing it because they're getting paid,
I mean, I've seen Craigslist ads that said, we're protesting and there's stipends. Maybe it's a $50 gift card. Maybe it's food. Maybe it's shirts and stickers and propaganda and flyers to hand out. But, do I have direct evidence that there was, there's a bank account that goes from here to here? I think it's very different. I think it's in forms of other compensation. But
yeah. So let's talk about social media. It seems to me like you do a really good job of putting yourself out on social media, X, LinkedIn, that stuff. Well, why is it so important for you to be active on social media?
Well, it's important to be on social media. I particularly grew my volunteer base through Facebook. It's very community driven. There's a lot of retired people that are still hanging on to Facebook. I always say I have so many moms on Facebook. They all like my stuff and cheer me on. But it is a great way to create events and then add people to events, and then you can show your before and after pictures. And that was very powerful to show that work. And while, nothing to totally brag about, but we have, 8,000 followers now on Facebook, a couple thousand on Instagram, and a few thousand on X. And I haven't, I don't buy very many ads. I think you can even buy followers on Instagram. So sometimes, you kind of always got to ask like what's a legit following and what's not. But it helps coalesce, right? And some of the first advice I got in 2020 from somebody, spare the details, but I was like, what do you mean? How do I kind of change the political landscape? How do I make voters aware that we need to vote differently on homeless policy or drug policy? And he said, you have to coalesce. And I was like, Bob, how do I do that? He goes, well, you have to have a direct action, like picking up trash. That's how you bring people together. And then you get the media involved, media. And so, started my Facebook page, and then I don't wait for Como, Cairo, Fox 13, King 5 to call me if I have a story, if it's Earth Day or noteworthy that we cleaned up a homeless camp because we got 3 people triaged to treatment or tickets home. We'll call them and tell about that story, or we'll call them about a story where people are constantly being swept around the corner and we're really not solving the problem, which then opens up for policy discussion. So it really allows people to see for their own eyes. And I'm a middle of the road, I've been calling myself a middle-aged woman lately, and people are like, don't say that. I was like, okay, fine, whatever. I am 50 years old, but I'm, I don't really feel like calling myself your girl next door. People at first were also like, you're a Karen, all that. And I'm like, I'm a volunteer. I volunteered for 28 months. I helped, I picked up the trash as my means to find my own truth. And social media, I would not be here today without podcasts, and also being on podcasts that, maybe you're aligned with, like God help me when Tucker Carlson calls me. because that's when my mom cuts me out of the will, But my friend Jenny Burton was actually on his podcast just yesterday, and she spent 30 minutes with him talking about her platform, which is, hey, I was a 17-time convicted felon. I was a drug addict for 30 years. I finally got arrested for the last time at 40, and I was done. But it was law enforcement and intervention, and now she has one of the most effective prison reform programs in the state, if not country. And so she's kind of an emerging hometown hero. So Jenny should come on your show sometime. But she needs to get her word out. Fox and Friends called me very early on. I was like, I wouldn't mind being on CNBC and CNN, and now I'm on News Nation, or, Fox 13, or Como versus King versus Cairo, or gosh, it'd be nice to get a KUOW bit, or a PBS Cascade Party had me on eventually. But what happened with We Heart and me was the conservative podcast, your Ari Hoffmans, your Jason Rants, my friend Brandy, who's down the middle, but she's ranting and raving on the Democrats right now and putting herself out there, having voted for Trump. And that's fine that she's doing her. But she's, all these particular media outlets are very similar in many ways. And so, We Heart Seattle's been red coded. I'm talking like a conservative. I'm for free market. I like less taxes. I want law and order. I like police, which again, I'd say that is also very Democratic back in the day. So, the social media element is very, very important to any movement to grow.
So did you see, was there a difference, an increase before your social media stuff and podcasting appearances? Did you see your donations increased after doing all this?
I would say with the Seattle Times piece that I had in 2021, of course that was printed and digital. We did the biggest historical 100%. Someone challenged me on this, and I don't know why it's not a bigger story, but we cleared probably 200,000 pounds of trash out of the East Queen Anne Greenbelt called the McLean Trail. And it was about 20 different abandoned camps on a slope that bridged Aurora to Upper Queen Anne. It was actually touted on TripAdvisor as the top urban hiking trail in Seattle, but it was full of needles and garbage and camps, and we found a dead body there as well. My first $35,000 check came. It was even before I got my 501c3, because the Seattle Times wrote about that story, and a gentleman, I was able actually to ask permission if I could use their foundation, but the Mark Milgard Foundation, if you probably know Milgard Windows. So that foundation read that article, and they're like, oh, that's making a difference, a visible something difference. And that's why we've been, I guess, popular with bootstrap donations. Then I went on to, Persona, non grata, Mike Solon and the Hold the Line podcast. He's always got beef in the city with him. He's the union president for the cops, and everyone's like, don't go on Mike Solon. Oh God, you're going to be, and I was just like, I want to get my message out, and that created some following and some donation. One of my most proud ones, though, was when I was on Brandy Cruz's podcast, and I talked about my basic needs stipend program, where the donations that we do have, we give out $25 gift cards, or recharge your cell phone, or pay for your gas, or even rental assistance for people who come out and litter pick with us, who are still homeless or are in recovery, or just are in community with us that have nothing. And we just give a basic needs stipend. And the folks over at Fred Meyer QFC heard that story and called me up and say, we want to give you $10,000 in gift cards to hand out to people who are in community that could use a grocery store run. And then the next gift they gave us was a almost $60,000 check to go buy a box truck.
Nice.
So that's pretty big, to get that kind of a exposure.
So how do you even keep track of all the trash you pick up? You pick all the trash up and you take it to some kind of weigh station somewhere? How do you track the amount and the weight and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, at first, how do we track the weight of the trash? I mean, I'll never forget the first dump run we did at Denny Park. We picked up all the trash for that day for a couple hours, and one of my neighbors went and got their pickup. We was like, now what do we do? I was like, well, someone's like, oh, I have a pickup truck. And we loaded it and we took it to the dump, and I was really freaked out about how much it was going to be. And he was like, it was like $80. And I was like, that's it for like the mattress and all the things. And I was like, how much did that weigh? And he goes, oh, it was like, 500 pounds or something. And so we started tracking each and every litter pick at the dump run. Was it 2,000 pounds? Was it 4,000 pounds? We have another gentleman from a commercial roofing company that drops me 40-yard dumpsters, like the size of this room, for free, and he does the dump runs. I mean, those are like $800 dump runs, and then he sends us, oh, that was a 10,000 pound load. But after a while, Jason, because we're not into too much infrastructure, we kind of look at it and go, 5,000 pounds. Oh, it's got a pallet and 5 propane tanks and 20 tires, 6,500 pounds. One bag's 50 pounds. Well, how much time does it take to fill a bag? Well, that's about a half hour per bag. And so we have these sort of, I'll call it dirty math, that are probably about 20% accurate on how much pounds, how much labor went into that, and how we've come up with 2 million pounds of trash, and how we've come up with 50,000 hours of boots on the ground labor, because every bag represents some kind of time component, and that translates to, how many hours we put in. The city of Seattle's collecting, charging or spending $450 an hour to send out all these contractors, and you start doing the math and the people we've housed, and even just collecting and picking up one dirty needle in a park, we've easily, the McLean Trail restoration that we did, it was priceless because the government didn't know how to go about it. And I would say we're pushing 50, if not 75. We're up there north of $50 million in like what would be a billable amount of labor, whether it's parks, needle collection, helping people off drugs, getting them out of our state, getting them back to family, reuniting them back to their family, kenneling dogs and cats so someone can go to treatment, now paying me a very humble social service wage and my 2 case managers. So we're definitely making a nickel scream, but we're providing an incredible tax-free value to the community.
Is there any type of trash that you don't pick up?
Well, once in a while we come across a makeshift toilet, and those are pretty nasty. We try to get those buried with dirt and put a big cone over them and call it into the city. We try to avoid the touching any form of human waste, but sometimes it's inevitable.
So how do you convince people to help?
Well, people want purpose. People want community. People want to see action. They want a beautiful Emerald City. And we'll use Nextdoor. We'll use, again, our Facebook. We'll sometimes advertise at community centers or churches to say, hey, we're out and about. We love the religious. We have lots of faith-based missions that come from all over the world, with dozens and dozens of kids that come out and clean our parks by the hundreds of thousands of pounds over the years. So the word's kind of out. I think it's boosting these social media ads and just giving people a sense of community, friendship, purpose, and kind of civic responsibility as well. Like, if you're not volunteering at least once a year, look, I'm crazy. I volunteered every day for 3 years, but I'm nuts. But come out and volunteer. And corporations, if you have a job, often will match your hours. A lot of corporations also have a corporate responsibility program where you can nominate a nonprofit for that. Sometimes can be several $1,000s. Sometimes like $20, $30, $40, $50,000. So if you're listening and you're at a corporation that seems like they're maybe more than like a $5 million revenue type of corporation, see if they have a give program, but you can match hours. But volunteering is vital to helping the government. The government can't do it all on their own. We help push them. We help hustle them. We help show that the parks aren't alone. The cops aren't alone. The fire's not alone. School grounds that get riddled with drug paraphernalia and activity. When volunteers come out, there's nothing more rewarding than having somebody drive by and honk their horn and say, thank you, thank you, thank you. Or somebody that joins and says, I've always wanted to do this. I've always wanted to pick up trash. I've always drove by that pile of pallets or those propane tanks on my walking trail, or that mound of tires that somebody illegally dumped. And we like that match for the community. And we're proud to say we have over 3,000 registered volunteers.
So how do you handle it? Maybe this hasn't happened, but suppose you go somewhere to pick up trash. There's a camp there. Mm-hmm. People can't come and say, hey, don't pick this trash up. You go away. How do you handle that?
Well, we say, okay, and we don't go there. It's very simple. But it's not too surprising, actually. These folks are human beings. They may be addicted to drugs or sleeping outside, but by and large, we have like a north of 99.5% chance of always way in advance of doing a public event. We make ourselves known. We build trust. We come out with our small team, 1 or 2 of us. We'll go meet, Coconut or Maniac or Marco or Baby or Johnny or whoever, whatever. It doesn't matter. We go out and we meet them and become friendly, and smoke a cigarette with them, figure out what their basic needs are, and break the ice and say, hey, we'd like to help pick up all this trash. And they're like, I've been wanting to do that too. Thank you. And we're like, we're not even with the government. We're not even with police. We're not even with nothing. We're just volunteers. And that has been a magic connection because it's something different, and they feel a different sense of we're there because we want to be, not because someone's paying us to do it. So it's very much a power level, power level setting of the power level. We're all in it together. We're all going to pick the trash. There's not one supervisor. And that's really where we kind of say we are mutual aid. We are anarchists in that sense, that we're all going to do it together, and we're going to do it in community. And together we're going to make the best choice on what we should do with this camp over here. Is it abandoned? Is it the guy in jail? Can we get him a new tent because that one's full of rats? Together we get buy-in, and we find out who the camp mayor is, and we work together in doing that. If there's some hostile crazy guy throwing machetes out of his tent, we'll call the cops on that one. Okay.
So how do you decide where to go?
It's community work order driven. We're really proud to say after 5 years, we're kind of on the hunt for trash now. We're not finding those big scatters anymore that are up in the woods. We actually think there's about only one left, and that's over in the Kinnear north end of the Kinnear Greenbelt in Queen Anne. We'll be getting to that one shortly. But community work orders, somebody will pounce on our Facebook page or email us. It's kind of, will you come to my neighborhood? Or the Ravenna got really bad, or we've been repopulated with tents because we now, of course, do very intentional outreach. We've become social services. We intervene, and we take probably 2 to 3 people a week to treatment, to rehab, tickets home, help work with other social services to maybe get people tiny homes or hotel rooms. I don't like doing that if the person hasn't gone to treatment first, but sometimes that's the case, especially if their drug of choice is meth, because they won't overdose alone in their room on that drug. We do have contracts now with property management companies, so we have a little bit of an enterprise going now to keep our lights on. So that's been a evolution of our organization. If one of those organizations have a hot spot, an exploding camp, a burned down camp, a person going wild on their block that needs intervention, and maybe they can't get a hold of the care team or the cops or some other intimate element, we come in and fill that gap. So it's just every day we get a call and we kind of prioritize.
What do you do to make sure everyone stays safe during these trash pickups?
Safety's always first. We have safety orientations. We have a whole 2-page, what to expect on our website, and a requirement to sign a waiver that they've read and understood. But we do go into the slopes and into the woods, and we do find uncapped needles and fentanyl foil. Sometimes we've seen those smoking tools loaded with drugs, and so we're very, very cautious about hey, don't touch something if it looks like those things. Let, quote unquote, the supervisors or the leads come in and handle that. One of the worst things that can happen is when people open up a water bottle that's full of urine and dump it out, or they unearth a makeshift toilet in the woods. It kills the pick, and we have to stop because it gets that toxic and gross. So just a lot of communication, a lot of orientation. We provide gloves, pinchers, sharps, lots of water, lots of snacks, lots of fun.
So what happens in this situation, right? Talk to the process. Suppose you tell some other stuff, right? And someone's picking up trash, and man, I got to take my glove off till I got a scratch, right? Oh, I'll just pick this paper up. Underneath the paper, there's a needle, and so they poke the needle through their hand. Talk me through what happens after someone pokes their hand with a needle or pokes a needle through their skin. Yeah,
I've personally been poked with five times, and very, very, very early on. We don't see needles anymore, of course, because fentanyl which is a smoked opioid, has really extinct black tar heroin and intravenous injection. But for me, I chose not to go to the doctor. I thought, well, it's a very old needle. It's not going to have active viruses on it. I mean, there might be other things that my tetanus shot would have covered. It's gross. But you're right. Sometimes you can just go in on something and, you know, you're careless. You don't have your glove on. That kind of a thing has happened to me personally. Another gentleman, we had somebody step on a nail. You know, they may or not choose to go to the hospital, but it's really up to the individual if they think that they need to do that. I did talk to somebody in another part of town, Mount Baker. He's got his own litter pick crew going, and he actually told me the other day, he goes, yeah, I stuck myself with a needle, and he said, I went to the doctor and did the thing, and now I'm on this medication for a month, and, you know, it's like it was expensive to treat, and it's sort of like the salmonella thing in the egg. It's like 1 in a billion eggs has got the salmonella that's going to take you down, and you just kind of got to go, is this the one needle that's going to take me down? You know, and it happens. It's just like it is something that people ask about, like, what about the needles? And I say, it's an inanimate object. Be safe. Use a tool. Be smarter than the needle. You know, we.
Unfortunately, that's kind of hard for some people to do. Unfortunately,
it is, and it's just like I ain't going anywhere near that. I don't want to go near nothing. What else can I do to support We Heart? Because I love what you're doing, and maybe that's why I can't get a date, Jason. My mom's like, you need to boil your feet when you come home, and you're, but no, it is not. It's not the most savory thing, but it's, you know, come out. We have the needs to have flaggers, hospitality, people that make name tags, hand out gloves, watch the truck for security. So we try to delegate workload based on like people's interest on if they want to go up into a slope and carry down like a couch or a pallet, or we've hauled 200 propane tanks one time out of the Magnolia Greenbelt over by the Elliott Bay Marina. I mean, that was crazy. It made national news.
So how many days a week do you pick up trash?
Excuse me, I'm like gurgling for my water here. We're out there between my 3 guys and our dozens of volunteers that are regulars. We're out there 7 days a week, one way or another. We're always doing outreach and taking calls, but our KPI, kind of like our standard, is we have to have something on the books once a week. And once in a while we'll do a midweek pop-up, and we're kind of playing around with that right now, where it's like, hey, you know, people like to come out from 1 to 3 on a Wednesday. You know, you have just different people come out based on if they work on weekends or if they're retired or they, you know, need to get out of the house. So, but the momentum with We Heart, different probably than any other volunteer platform I've ever been aware of. And we even get overflow volunteers from like Union Gospel Mission and another one that's escaping me. I'm not Mayor something. I should know what I'm talking about on that one. But my point is, by having scheduled picks every week and on the calendar, it's created momentum. I would say that was a key element to our momentum is we weren't just like, okay, it's once a quarter, we're going to go out and whittle away at 1 million pounds of trash. It was that we were relentlessly doing it every week all through the pandemic. I mean, 2020, 2021, 2022. We could go outside, we could distance, we could maybe not wear our mask. It was just a really big need, and that's what created the momentum, the force to be reckoned with.
So what are your KPIs for success?
How many pounds of trash do we pick up weekly? We post that on our page. How many people we get off the streets? What's our level of civic engagement? You know, going to City Hall, testifying. But the 2 main things, I guarantee you, I can get about 5,000 pounds of trash out of the city of Seattle a week. I cannot guarantee you that I'm going to get that human being to go to rehab or to call their family or to serve their warrant. Hey, We Heart Seattle said it. We're pro, go serve your warrant. We love responsibility. We love empowerment. We love growing through difficulty. And when people are going to these diversion programs and avoiding their warrants, and they're in the woods and they're getting sick and high. It's like, what is your problem, man? And they're like, I got a warrant in Bellevue. I'm like, go to Bellevue and go serve your warrant. And then say that you have a place to come, a place to volunteer, a place to live with WeHeart. And you'll get out super quick because this beautiful county doesn't like to keep people in jail long. No. So our KPI, though, like the number one, guarantee you we're picking up about 20,000 pounds of trash a month.
Is there any way possible for you to go to the city of Seattle and like get reimbursed by them, since this is what they should be doing anyway?
Sometimes I get a little like all these people. I'm suing the city for $30 million, and I'm suing the city because this thing and that thing. I hate having people have to pay their own taxes to pay me back because I've spent $50 million of time, talent, resources building a movement. I mean, I'm like, hey, Bob Ferguson, you want to cut me a $50 million check for cleaning up the city of Seattle? Mayor Harrell, county executive, Girmay or Balducci, whoever's going to win. I mean, there's a part of me that sometimes feels like I probably wouldn't be. I go down that rat hole sometimes. To be honest, it would make me probably a little angry. And so I try not to go there. What I would love is the symbolic key to the city. Just recognize the work publicly. Not for me, but for the thousands and thousands of people that have come out and literally cleaned the city of Seattle. There's another great organization in Seattle, Alki by and by. They clean. His name's Eric Bell. He's got a crew over there. They've stayed out of the controversial crosshairs because they don't do homeless outreach, but they clean and spruce West Seattle. And they've got a social media presence. They don't. Again, Eric's like, I'm not an advocate. I don't want to get out there and talk about policy, what's working, what's not. And by doing that, for me, I'm a disruptor, and that's created. I'm a bit of a lightning rod, and so some of the politicians are like, "Yeah, we like what you do, but we're not going to go out there and put our own political platform maybe at risk by affiliation, since affiliation of the affiliate is a very bad thing here in King County." But I have asked the mayor multiple times, and I will ask him again, Mayor Harrell, give my volunteers the key to the city. Just say that you see it and you're thankful for it, that we did it during your term. And I don't have to think anymore about the millions of dollars that we saved our city.
So we have like Seattle city government and King County government. Are these two like in competition? Do they like overlap bureaucracies? Like,
that's an interesting question. How does the city work with the county? And I was just at a luncheon actually with some county council members, and they talked about how most people, well, one, they don't vote but every 4 years federally, right? There are all these ballots that show up right now. They're like, what are these ballots? We just voted for the president of the United States. Why are we voting again? Oh, these local municipalities that we have to urge are so important to how your local backyard is run. So continue to reiterate that here. But the county is middle management. It's kind of between the state, Bob Ferguson, our governor, statewide, and our local municipalities, cities. I think there's like 38 cities within the county. And so it's just another barrier, another oversight where the county picks up county property. What's county dirt? In my movement, I always talk about what dirt are we on? Are we on parks dirt, city dirt, county dirt, federal dirt, rail dirt, state dirt? And that's how I know kind of who to call or who to collaborate with, as we've kind of have actually gotten some agencies to play ball with us a little bit more. But county is behavioral health, for example. Behavioral health, what the hell does behavioral health mean? Behavioral health is when people like laymen go, oh, the drug addicts and the mentally ill. That's behavioral health, King County behavioral health. And the city isn't responsible for that, quotes here. But the behavioral health, drug addiction, and mental health crisis happens in the city of Seattle, happens on our sidewalks, it happens in our parks. So the city has to say, well, we'll give you some of our city funding to help with things like overdose response. And so they kind of overlap a lot in that public safety, drug, mental illness overlap.
So I think there's a blog on your website that said Earth Day is every day. Can you talk about that?
Well, sure. I mean, we brush our teeth every day. Every day is brush your teeth day. Every day is do your dishes day. Maybe not all of us. Let's just say at least once a week we're taking our garbage out, right? So that's the trash is constant. And if you're a Hallmark holiday person, and you're writing a good Valentine, it's like your message is usually like, I love you every day. But, this is kind of what we do. We like to designate days to raise awareness. And there's nothing wrong with having special days to recognize how important it is to take care of our environment. But we believe in our environmental stewardship is 365. And we've been highlighting the drug paraphernalia that we're finding in our parks right now is absolutely out of control. There's a visual that I've been doing on my socials of hundreds, and if not thousands, of pieces of used foil that smokes fentanyl, the number one illegal lethal drug in the country, taking an entire airplane of bodies out of the sky to overdose death, who didn't have a friend with them, didn't have Narcan by them. And that drug paraphernalia is given out by King County Behavioral Health to smoke the drugs. And then that paraphernalia ends up in our parks. And I've been writing about the contradiction of public health and public safety, and how on one hand we're trying to do something to stop the spread of disease, but then on the other hand, we're enabling it. And so, shout out to my environmentalists, where's the people that are fighting for the salmon culverts and the streams and the feed the whales and the clean water and the save the tree people. I'm like, come walk with me and I'll show you what it looks like to have Earth decimated by this activity of untreated mental illness and drug addiction. It's horrific what it's doing to our green spaces.
So from your point of view, how's what you're doing actually improving the environment?
Picking up plastics. We improve the environment by picking up metals, propane tanks, tires, pallets, getting dilapidated, abandoned old RVs towed and put into impound. Raising the flag, talking about it, saying, cleaning out the culverts. We did a We Heart Tequila pick with the union. Shout out to International Union of Painters and Allied Trade, D5, down there in Tequila. Across the street from their office was a creek that had again, it was a salmon culvert. It was completely blocked with homeless encampment trash, bikes, rubber tires, clothing, appliances. It was just the random stuff. I mean, literally everything, and the kitchen sink. And, you show that before and after, Jason, and it's so powerful when you say, look at all of this trash, and then poof, it's gone, and it's all bagged up and we haul it away. It's an incredible visual, and why it's just, that's the before and after. It's restoring safe hiking trails for our dogs. I mean, I know a lot of people drive all the way out to Mount Si and Mount Tiger and Wallace Falls, and we have such a beautiful region, but man, we have some of the most beautiful urban hikes here in the East and West Duwamish hiking trail. We have McLean Trail. We have the Kinnear Trail. We have the St. Mark's Cathedral Trail. These are all beautiful urban trails that are uphill both ways and are clean and safe and restored because of volunteers going through there. Cub Scouts, Eagle Scouts, they used to do it too, but over time they've just really been taken by a lot of this sort of homeless activity. So if you like to hike and you like to stay close to home, a good way to keep those areas activated and safe, a good deterrent, is getting your own boots on the ground out there. And if inclined, bring your litter picker and a little bag from underneath your sink and come help us keep it clean.
So can you talk about what does your board of directors and your advisory council do?
So when you have a nonprofit, a 501c3, which is a tax-exempt entity where people are allowed to donate and write it off, that would be a tax write-off. That requires you to have a board of directors that governs and oversees as a chair, vice chair, secretary, and treasurer. So your typical organization would have a minimum of 4 voting officers. And they oversee the work of the executive director, which would be me, and to ensure that I'm not taking all the money and flying all over the world with the money and sculpting bronze pictures of myself and murals of my family above above the hearth, right? So you hear these horror stories with some of these like bigger nonprofits that get kind of carried away with the way they spend their money, but I mean, there's multi-million dollar nonprofits and multi-billion nonprofits, and they get very big very fast. And, as we're hearing controversial, whether you believe it or not, what's happening with USAID and kind of the recent King County audit that found millions and millions of missing dollars from all of these nonprofits that don't have paper trails to things like gift cards, to things like subcontractor bills, and the subcontractor of the subcontractor doesn't match up. So the board of directors should be overseeing kind of the P&L, what's the budget, what are you spending your money on? Are we, in line as a little under $1 million operation and very small, and the founder and principal still being at the helm, which is me. There's a lot of trust built in with our organization. But that oversight is very important. We're very, very proud to have Tom Wolfe as our vice chair. And he's a national spokesperson for advocacy for Recovery First programs. He himself was homeless in San Francisco, lost his family, lost his job, was homeless for years. And through law enforcement and intervention and the help of the Salvation Army, he was able to get clean and sober and reunited with his family and become an outspoken counter narrative to the, if he only just had a house. And he's like, I had a house, I had a family. Unfortunately, I got a taste of opioids because of a surgery I had, and I wanted more. And he went down that spiral. And that's a very familiar story out on the streets. And Tom is on our board, and he's lockstep with Mayor Lurai in San Francisco. He's a council advocate for the San Francisco council, and he's traveling the country as a keynote speaker talking about what worked for him, and it counters the direction that this state has taken for more than a decade. And so we're proud to have his expertise. I gave a shout out to Jenny Burton earlier, Michelle Hooks also on our advisory board, Grant Denton. These are some names of some folks that live to tell, and they need to be heard. But because their live to tell involved intervention by law enforcement and their cycle was broke through incarceration, it just goes again against the narrative of housing first, that these drug addicts and criminals, as a byproduct of needing to commit crime to support the drug habit, just need a house. And that's finally, I think there's a kind of a tide turning. Well, no one ever just thought it was a house and then that was it. It was a house then. But I'm like, it's very hard for somebody to find their pathway to recovery when the fox is in the hen house. You throw all these people with all these disabilities into one of many of our Housing First projects, which include DESC, Plymouth, Lehigh, Catholic Community Services, and you put them indoors, and your drug dealers on one side of you and your drug buddies on the other side of you. How do you decide you're going to quit? It doesn't happen. I think Jenny said, in the 5 years she worked at DESC, she could maybe count on one hand where people got out, even though they were inside their own belly of the beast. So treatment before housing for this population of people. And so we're really proud to have folks like that on our board.
So back to your friend with the opioid and surgery. I have had kind of a similar story. So in the Army, which I got hurt really bad, really bad, right? And they gave me some Vicodin. I told myself I can never take this again, because I just knew, like, yeah, if I take this, I'm fucking mortgaging the house. I'm like, I just luckily I was like smart enough and knew like I can never take this again. But I was like, man, I feel so good. Like I could do anything. Like, yeah, I took Vicodin one time, like I can never do it again, right?
Yeah, I think that would be me and cocaine. I've for whatever I don't know how I've avoided narcotics my whole life. I have had prescribed pain pills before on a surgery, and I'm like, oh, I like this. Yeah. And then
I like this maybe a little bit too much.
And I'm like, oh, that, and then I think I'll have a glass of wine with it. Wow, this is really great. And I'm sitting there.
I'm on top of the world.
I'm like, this is good. And but I never. What I didn't have that, like, I need more, and became fully. I think it is something it could be genetic. Mm-hmm. You're kind of born that way to have that addictive personality or not, or that addicted towards substances. Depending on the substance. I mean, there are people who are addicted to sugar. I mean, they say sugar is actually more addictive than heroin. Yeah, people I know multiple people who were, had the back surgery, had the pill, and then they're like, whoa, and they did mortgage the house and lost the family. So
yeah, that bike grabbed me and said, "Hey, we're gonna be best friends, Jason." He said, "No, we're not. No, we're not."
Yeah. There's a great Broadway production. It came to Seattle. It was called Jagged Little Pill, or was it called Jagged Little? No, Jagged Little Pill. Yeah, I think it was Jagged. Then it was the Alanis Morissette song, and it was the whole play was to that album. But I was just like, whoa, that's exactly how it happens. This mom had surgery, she got the prescription, and then she went into the alleyway and was buying it from the guy with the backpack and the hoodie and the skateboard, and then the family fell apart, and she had an overdose, and the family had to respond. It was just like a really, real beautifully tragic way to tell that story of what an everyday family can go through with these substances. They're awful. Yeah. So what do you do? Prevention. How do we stop these drugs from making it? President Trump just landed this morning after spending a meeting with President Xi, and he said, stop sending the precursors to Mexico that they're making the fentanyl with. If you stop the distribution, the deportation, the export of the precursors, I'll reduce your tariff and we'll give you a deal on energy. I mean, I like that. Remember when we talked about the menu?
Yeah. Yeah.
President Trump, just those juicy lamb chops. I like those. I don't like his hummus. I like his juicy lamb chops. I want those. I want to see more of that action at the federal level. And then it makes it harder to get high. And then you start making it harder to get high very locally, like the drug paraphernalia, not handing out the foil, the bubbles, the treatment before housing. I love Proposition F. This is a proposition, very, very controversial proposition that passed when Mayor London Breed was in office in San Francisco. And it said you cannot come into the city of San Francisco and get services without passing a UA, urinary analysis, first for narcotics. It was very controversial. And she was just saying, just for new people coming in. San Francisco's not a place for you come and get your $700 a month cash card benefits to flip them and go buy dope on our streets. That is what we need to start doing, is you just can't come in and use drugs. I'm sorry, but I sometimes call it free-addle. It's just free. Come here. It's easy to do drugs. No cops. We're starting to see the comeback of cops. I'm starting to see more arrests for, the open air use and things like that. And, Bellevue just passed an ordinance where, you don't have to go far to see who's doing it right. What's Bellevue doing? Well, Bellevue said if you're caught with retail theft on your third time, it goes to a felon. Now you're spending some time in prison. So I say maybe that is a way that people break their cycle of addiction. They don't want to go back to prison. Jail can be treatment. There's other states that are bringing treatment programs into jail pods and creating kind of treatment wings that are people who are starting their treatment and transformative path out while they're in. So those are some things we can do very easily.
Next, talk about your approach to fundraising. Like, how much time do you spend on fundraising?
I spend, let me just do something really quick here.
No
I have, I am in an emergent field. People are dying. What do people need? Okay, we're good. I'm going to get back to the podcast. Sorry about that. We're a 3-person operation. So we're very proud that we make a nickel scream. So I don't have an office manager or an executive director or assistant. We don't have a person entering all our daily activities so I can go get that grant to show that I have capacity because I gave out so many burritos or so many housing vouchers or so many trips to the wherever. We're just different because we're small and we're private funded, and we use social media to literally post our achievements daily. So we're a little bit different in that way. We are private funded. Well, what does that mean? It means nothing out of your paycheck comes to the work we do. This is a tax-free, government-free enterprise. And one bootstrapped donation led to the next, word of mouth. We talked about the influence of media that allowed me to buy trucks. The influence of cleaning a park gave me not one, but at one point I had I had 4 free offices, storefront on Westlake, on Yesler, on Market Street, and downtown on 3rd Avenue, because landlords were like, here's the keys to my office. Clean my block, clean my park, help the homeless, help the drug addicted, right? And then one guy told his guy, and that guy told their foundation. And then I started getting family foundation money that was sort of in that like $25,000 check. So the 200s became the 2000s, became the 20,000s, became what was another word of mouth, where a couple years ago I got my first $100,000 check, and it was very much like, come to my office. Within 20 minutes, a foundation said, I love Seattle so much, and I so want to see action. And my action was traction, and it was different, and it was just hands-on. And I call ourselves a do tank, not a think tank. And it really affects people in a moving way. And I haven't ever done a gala or an auction or a paddle raise, or, once in a while someone will do one of those, like, for my birthday, I want you to donate to We Heart Seattle, and get like a $50 check, or, but Rotary, my Rotary Club throws me, I'm a beneficiary of get like $8,000 or $9,000 or $10,000 out of that. But by and large, it's very generous people that have foundations and donor advised funds that kind of require them to give a certain percent of their financial portfolio to charity every year in order to get sort of tax shelter over here and here and here. I don't know exactly how it works. I probably should. So sometimes I'll just get a random $5,000 check because the financial institute went eeny, meeny, miny, mo. You got to give it here. Do you like environmental stuff? Yeah, here, boom. That's where the money goes. So not all the relationships I have are very personal.
So next, let's talk about something that'll probably be kind of controversial, right? So here in Seattle, I think we have something called the housing industrial complex. What I mean is, like, in big picture, like, all these big corporations give millions of dollars in nonprofits. The nonprofits take the money. You have, like, people getting paid 6-figure incomes, whatever. But then nothing really changes, right? So is anything going to change? Because if they solve the problem, their job goes away, the money goes away, right?
So you're talking about the homeless industrial complex, or homeless Inc. It's a term adopted by center right talking points. And so while I believe in it, you say it, you're just cast off into this like uncredible pound in the conservative, mantra. But as a person who's been at this for 5 years, I do have to ask those same questions. Homelessness is up more than 50%. We claimed it was a state of emergency under Murray almost a decade ago. We've applied this housing first model now for 10 years.
Plenty of money's being thrown at it.
Billions and billions, 5 billion, billions of money across the West Coast. And this proliferation just keeps happening. The overdose deaths alone in the last decade is about 30,000 people in the state of Washington. I mean, we're killing people off as fast as we are creating more. And so I kind of call it the Cobra effect. It's almost like the more supply we have, the more money that we're putting into this, the more homeless we're creating, because we've not created a platform of services where it's required to reach self-sufficiency. That was the sort of federal policy of housing first, no requirement to enroll in treatment, no requirement to get a job, just go inside and in perpetuity enjoy your apartment forever. I mean, it's crazy. Well, so people stopped, those are just the programs that got the money, and more money and more money. And as more people came into our state, our county, and our city, they built more capacity, and that got more federal grant money. And then there's this sort of crony capitalism, where now you're working with your legislators and your council members, and the developers are BFFs with these guys, and they're approving and permitting for you to build this sort of affordable housing that's for this, particular homeless population. And that's where it's like a big construction project, because what else is it if the people aren't getting served or helped. I mean, the data is just not reconciling.
No, it's not.
The Cobra effect, and I just heard the term myself about a couple weeks ago. I was like, that's exactly what I've been trying to say, which is in colonial times, you would get a bounty for bringing in a cobra head because cobras were like the nuisance rodent, I guess, of the time. And then people started going, oh, let's breed the cobras, more money. And so our system...
Yeah, that's a damn good analogy.
Right?
Yeah.
Somebody wrote that on my Facebook page. I'm like, how have I not heard this before? So that really resonated with me because I've always thought, the smartest, opportunistic, fresh out of jail or fresh out of prison or fresh out of a divorce or broken family, you come to Seattle. And I think a lot of families, I know this, I mean, I can see, well, drugs are really easy to buy here. Drugs are easy to buy. They're easy to use. You can use them in parks. Hell, we give you a free house for life and we don't require you to quit drugs. So I say we have created not just a homeless industrial complex, but a safe consumption site project. Nobody's required to get off drugs. So we're just go use indoors, bring your outside chaos indoors and die in there, which is what's happening. But I lost my train of thought on that, so you're gonna have to ask me another question.
No worries. So these people who run these nonprofits, right? Do you think it might be like they're so involved with problems? What's the word? Like you can't see the forest for the trees. Like they're so involved with they can't see all this other stuff going on.
Well, okay, so
just like for example, like if you own a restaurant, you're there for years, right? And someone brand new comes and like, why do you have like 10 inches of grease on your wall, right?
Yeah.
You're there every day, you don't see it, right? Think maybe that might be the case.
I mean, I refuse to believe that there's a bunch of people sitting around the corner around a table going, how do we just keep this thing going? I don't think it's like this intentional corruption in the sense. I think that they're wrapped up into it. There's money that's given to different programs that different legislators are championing. They're championing job creation. Well, this will create jobs if we build. And there's just all of that overlap, but they've got to open their eyes and see the bodies are piling up. And only up until the executive order that came out a few months ago from the federal office, which I'm proud my fingerprints are on from my advocacy working with fixhomelessness.org, which is a program under the Discovery Institute that is, and Dr. Robert Marbut, I have to give him a shout out as a senior fellow there that also worked for the White House under multiple presidents to say, housing people alone is not going to solve the crime issue or addiction or mental health. It's like treatment before that. And so now we have the executive order that says if you don't make recovery and accountability a part of your program, you're going to get a cutting of the federal funds. And so Trump has said, no more of this housing first nonsense. You've got to have an element. So a lot of people who have been higher barrier and are in the recovery space are getting those phone calls from what are the old guard, and the old guard's like, hey, we've always been about people reaching self-sufficiency. I mean, who wouldn't want somebody to not be their best self? So I'm like, except you weren't doing it. But isn't it interesting how people so quickly rebrand? I've never changed my stripes overnight. I've always stood for this approach is failing our brothers and sisters. The overdose death, the squalid living conditions, the hands-off live and let live, giving out more harm reduction isn't working, but they're just can't change their mind, Jason. It's wild to see, but their cover is coming from Dr. Caleb Banta Green and the academics at the University of Washington that keep pushing this narrative. Even Dr. Sam, I'll botch his last name, who was the mastermind behind the Housing First study, which, by the way, was studied on alcoholics. Now we're talking 25 plus years later, and we're dealing with fentanyl, not the same at all. And they just keep saying more harm reduction, get them indoors. You can't help but think this is a revolution that's being fighted under the guise of housing first and housing drug addicts when they're pushing for drugs for all, free drugs, government-funded drugs, safe supply. That's how you combat the cartel. And it's just this like philosophy coming out of the universities that aren't standing up and there's no proof of. And so until there's a bigger voice, or what me and my partners, like Jenny Burton and Art Dolan and Tom Wolfe and Grant Denton and these guys build something that shows data that's like, see, we've got this thing over here that we're building privately, and maybe they'll come around, but it feels too big to fight. You do you. We're going to do it our way.
So what's your take on this, right? So I'm on TikTok way too much, right? And somebody did a video on there maybe a couple weeks ago, right? And I guess there's a nonprofit here called like St. Mary's Place or Mary's Place.
Mm-hmm, Mary's Place.
So she talked about like how she could decide to quit Mary's Place because Amazon gives a lot of money. And Amazon asked Mary's Place to do something. They did. And she was like, I had to quit because, you know, if Amazon gives us money, we should be able to do what we want to do with it, right? So if a corporation gives a nonprofit a whole lot of money, how much say should they have in what the nonprofit does or doesn't do? And how much should the nonprofit listen to that?
So your question is the influence like a corporate sponsor has on a nonprofit?
Or how much should they have on the nonprofit? Like if a corporation says, nonprofit do 1, 2, 3, but you really want to do it, but you do it anyway because you don't know the money to end.
Well, I mean, the government is the government and the policies of you have to do it this way. You cannot require anything of this human being to get the apartment that we're going to fund. That's housing first. And now there's a lot of conversation about like reformulating money so that, you know, oh, well, what % will go to programs that are maybe abstinence-based, for example. That number right now is still 0. From a corporate or private funding scenario, my own personal experience, I've never gotten a big corporate spot. Like there's no Alaska Airlines, Boeing, Microsoft, you know, REI, Expedia, Costco. Hey, if you're listening, would love to have a corporate sponsor. I mean, Fred Meyer QFC, we always love you guys. WaFed recently gave us a donation. The Spady family. I have a lot of partners that are businesses. So I don't want to say that I don't have that like, you know, we're going to give you a 3-year endowment so you can build infrastructure. Would be like what they did with Mary's Places. We're going to give you the big nut so you can build these shelters in our Amazon towers, which is what you're talking about in South Lake Union. And I don't know. To be honest, I don't know. I have no visibility to what the requirement would be of a corporate gift like that says, you know, we want you to build so many beds, or it has to be low barrier or high barrier, or you have to have so many bodies in those beds at such capacity. But I would believe that there's very little requirement oversight from a private gift like that. That's why we love private gifts. I mean, it's trust-based typically.
So you talk about this some already, but talk about the impact of leading to drug rehab before housing.
The impact of treatment before housing, is that kind of the kind of direction we're going? Well, having tried to put people into housing firsthand early on in my first couple of years, realized that those people were right back out on the street, or weren't able to reach self-sufficiency because, you know, of the ecosystem I talked about earlier, kind of that fox in the hen house. It's just inhumane and cruel to put somebody indoors before addressing their co-occurring conditions. I've been inside these housing first apartments. They're squalid. They're covered in roaches and rats and soiled clothes and mattresses and unused appliances. It's like what it looks like outside is what it looks like inside. And then you close that door, and now statistically double digits are now where the overdose deaths are coming from. So it's just, and there's a school of thought of, well, again, live and let live, put them inside. Dying's a part of life. And that's how they're choosing to die. Why should we intervene? Let them just do them their way, except for that we, the taxpayers, are paying for it. And it's like, I don't believe that's the right approach. And so we argue about it. The other element is we're not giving away free drugs yet. And so what do they have to do to get their drugs? They have to sell their bodies. They have to porch pirate, smash and grab, trade their, you know, stamp cards for cash, steal, retail theft. You know, the whole catalytic converter scandal, all of those things support the drug habit. And that doesn't go away. So you didn't solve that problem. You didn't solve the public safety problem. So that's the other reason why you treat first. But you just don't get to a path. That's why you see that cyclical in and out of jail, in and out of rehab, in and out of mental health, because we don't break the cycle with transformative programming, which my colleague Jenny Burton does with her OUT program, which she does prison reform work out in Forks. She, again, was a 30-year addict. And she's like, I was in that cycle. I was in the house. I was in treatment. I was in jail. And until I got treatment before housing and had it in a sustainable way, I was going to be in that cycle. So it doesn't end the cycle of human suffering. It just prolongs their suffering.
So I follow up. I think you recently did an op-ed somewhere, and it was titled "A Compassionate Path Forward: Street Level Intervention Can Save Lives."
Yeah, that I actually was inspired to write that. It was published in Center Squared, and it was after spending several hours in a room with candidates for council, for King County, for mayor. It was called The Great Debate at the Washington Athletic Club. And, we were asking these electeds and future electeds, what are we going to do about the service resistant? So we're kind of going back to that population of people who are out there, they're languishing, they're folded over, they're sleeping in a doorstep, they're getting frostbite, they're getting mugged and grimly and sadly and preyed on, whether it's sex work for just a small amount of money to get their fix. All of those things is a grave danger to oneself. And there is a law called Ricky's Law, again passed in 2018, that allows everyday citizens as well as law enforcement and other social workers to file for a petition through the designated crisis response team. And that's a King County team. So that's where King County can help the city, is by bringing more DCRs into the city and writing those petitions to do a involuntary commitment or a civil commitment. That is the missing link. I stand behind that. I stand behind my recovery community that all said until it was either law enforcement intervention or this kind of other element of behavioral health intervention through Ricky's Law, which we just aren't using. It's been said to be clunky. It's, there's whether it's lack of transportation. The Seattle Times did 2 different pieces on it in 2021 and 2024, or was it 2022 and 2024, wrote about Valley cities having all this capacity that they built for secured rooms so that the Ricky's Law could be used as a mechanism to help those people suffering on the streets. The other thing I kind of wrote about there was the EMOTE program in Everett, Everett's mobile opioid response team, where you have drug addicts out on the street, addicts in recovery, addicts helping addicts model, which is, by the way, worked since over 100 years ago. Anyone listening who's a part of Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, a free peer-based group where you get a sponsor and you're held accountable and you go through a 12-step program, is very effective. It's worked for millions of people, and it's global wide. So you leave town and you're in Hawaii, you find your local AA group and you stay your course. So I really big shout out to something that's existed for over 100 years. But Everett's model is really the model that We Heart's doing, but they're government funded, which is you go in at the street level and you do intervention, more boots on the ground. We need hundreds of people in outreach every day in the field. We should go outside and just see hundreds of people crawling, walking, booting through the encampments, the RVs, the sidewalks, doing what I kind of call on-view outreach. Why do we have to wait for the 911 call? Why do we have to wait for that work order? You kind of ask, how do I pick where we go? Heck, in Seattle, you just open your eyes and walk to where there's chaos. And that's 12th and Jackson, it's 3rd and Pine, it's 2nd and Lenora, it's Ballard Leary Way, it's up on Aurora when we're talking about women who are being trafficked. So with intervention at the ground level, being proactive, right now we're spending all this money on overdose response, the Orca Center, administering Suboxone right after an overdose at the street level. Overdose response team. Everybody's really proud about, building these places for people to go willingly, which that doesn't happen, very rare, millions of dollars going into these places when millions should be going into outreach on the ground, case management on the ground. Nobody needs to be in an office. We need to be on the ground in our mobile vans, triaging, 911, on view, state of emergency. People are suffering. They're dying. 3 a day in King County. What are we doing inside? All hands on deck. We talked about my corporate career at DHL. It's a perfect example. During peak season, everybody's shopping, right? It's Black Friday, Cyber Monday. Our warehouses were packed like sardines all of November, all of December. Guess what we had to do? Everybody had to get out of the office, out of the field, and into the warehouses and box up packages. We had to do fulfillment. We had to do pick and pack. It was peak season. Well, the drug epidemic is at peak season. And if you're a social worker, if you're a CEO, if you're being paid money that goes towards human services, why are you inside still studying, surveying, debating about what to do? We got to get on the ground. It's peak season.
Yeah, that would definitely be one of my criticisms for these nonprofits. It's still like, of course, I'm making this, I have no proof of this, but it's still like, to me, this is a 24/7 problem, right? This is like a lot of them that's working 8 to 5, you know, they work 8 to 5, go home, go to the weekends, go, you know, spend time with your family. But like, I don't see how you fix a 24/7 problem by working 8 hours a day.
Well, I love New York. The program escapes me, but I think it's at least, gosh, New York's like 20 years ahead of us. So it's probably like a 20-year-old nonprofit. And that nonprofit raised money probably through government funding to put 24/7 outreach on the subways, transformed the subways, absolutely transformed them from unsafe to safe. And we have a lot to learn from New York from 20 years ago. Actually, more like 30 years ago. I always reference some of the things that New York did because it's very similar to what We Heart is, which is like service district, sort of block by block approach of kind of creating community safety, creating safety through community engagement. But it's just upside down, right? So the point is, what about on Christmas? What about on these holidays? What about the weekends? What about even the care team will tell you, this is the new bright, shiny third arm of our public safety department in Seattle next to fire and police, that, well, what most of the calls are from, midnight to 6 a.m. Well, fucking get there then.
Yeah.
Put your people off of the day shift and onto the night shift. Let everyday society that's up and give us some training, give us some Narcan, teach us de-escalation, hold a public forum about trauma-informed care. And in fact, Whatcom County did that a few years ago. Whatcom County is our neighbors north. They actually did a sort of like a all hands on deck. Everybody needs to kind of have some basic skills on how to engage with our kind of public behavioral health crisis. What if you're at a grocery store and someone's going nuts? You need to have de-escalation skills. You need to have trauma-informed skills. So like everybody is an outreach worker, are we not?
Yeah.
Why can't we all be outreach workers? Take the load off of some of our first responders and get those people working when all the hot calls are. If you know that data, why are we putting people out on the day shift? Just move them over or budget for around the clock. But you're absolutely like, what are we doing?
Can it ever be too late for someone to get better, be saved, make a better life? Is there any point where someone like, okay, this person is far gone?
It's never too late. Never too late. I had a guy, Jenny Burton's a great example, obviously, but she wasn't even doing fentanyl. She got out for a fentanyl addict, and this was without law enforcement intervention. And just imagine if we used Ricky's Law. Just imagine if we saved more lives through law enforcement. We would save so many more lives if the mayor would just make the order, start arresting these people that are a grave danger to themselves. It's called a 5150. Save their lives. Stop letting them fold over and hustle for that lethal hit that inevitably will come.
So I think the pushback then, some people will say like, well, how do you know you don't go too far? How do you know you don't target people who doesn't apply to this? Like, how do you keep this picking up? Okay, Jason Kavanagh's walking down the street. We don't know, but he's a danger because he jaywalked, right? Like,
yeah, but that's like the what if. I would say what we are trained, you are intoxicated, you're on fentanyl, you have open wounds, you make your assessment of kind of what the situation is. I don't think you do a 51510 lightly. It's not easy to do. There's a petition, there's paperwork, you make a decision as a team. But I'll talk about Joshua Painter and his partner Ian were living and languishing, in Post Alley, actually, dude,
Pretty close here, yeah.
right here. I mean, and everybody, these guys, they're always in that heated doorway, and they're, just fentanyl foil and all the needles, and they're just languishing and open wounds. One guy's in a wheelchair with his foot all wrapped up. You'd walk by those guys, become desensitized or a nerd to what it is, and you just keep calling the care team and calling the mid and calling WeHeart. Once we got the call, within 1 week, we had him in a treatment center and his scheduled amputation for his toes. And we went into a private funded program called Battlefield Addiction, and it was a little expensive, but we used our money wisely. We raised the money to pay for that program. They could have gone to a state paid program, but they were a couple. We were living and learning and kind of determining how and what services would work best for certain people. And they're on the cover of my drug and alcohol directory that we made for services, which is our one-of-a-kind, go-to for people who are ready for rehab. And you look at these guys, like, I got permission, like that ball of people that are in a stoop with all the stuff, and you just think, that's it for them. And, Joshua made it. He's clean and sober for now 2 years. He is living in Las Vegas, working for Mandalay Bay. He's going on vacation. He's like the happiest guy in the world. And he's not in his codependent relationship anymore. Codependency is the biggest barrier to reaching self-sufficiency for the people who are left on the streets, clinging onto that pipe, on that foil, is codependent by now. By now, I always say it's 2025. We've built, we've studied, we've surveyed, we've done so much. 30,000 people have died. Like, where's it all? Who's left? And there's very few scenarios, I think, where, maybe somebody is at palatable care and they're really schizophrenic and somehow got addicted. The saddest story I heard actually this week, it must have been Monday or Tuesday, my colleague Tim Emerson called me and he goes, well, I got an undocumented guy that's homeless and no insurance, of course, and he's addicted to fentanyl. I'm like, wow, what a sick fuck that preyed on that refugee.
Yeah.
And got him hooked to probably go steal. The dealer gets a cut, and I don't got a place to send this kid.
Yeah.
So, let him in. America. Well, yeah. Well, if we don't have a place to put people,
exactly,
that's going to get them first. The drug dealers, the cartel. And then they become dealers. And then it's like, oh, you call all these guys drug dealers. Well, what else do they got to do? And that's why there is a far left good point that this is how these people have to, make money, because we won't give people jobs without ID. Mm-hmm. Like, so again, I do believe we have to make it easier. If I wave my magic wand, maybe somebody in charge, hopefully listening, maybe the government, Governor Ferguson. I used to work at a cannery in Wisconsin, and we paid migrant workers to come up to pick fruit for cash. It was cash, it was Farm Act or something, and I worked at a cannery, and I loved these guys, man. They came up, they brought their families, they lived in, manufactured kind of shelter. They made awesome food, awesome attitude. They made bank, and then they went home. And my plan would be cash for trash. Let's bring in nomadic shelter and start in LA and work our way to Canada and clean up the West Coast and give these folks who want to work purpose, housing. Oh, well, that's forced housing. That's forced work housing. And that's slavery. It's like, these guys want to work. It's not for free. Just housing, and here's your job, and you can do it without ID, and you pick up the rest of the 10 million pounds of trash that's on the West Coast. Trash for cash.
So
cash for trash.
When did you start WeHeart Seattle?
September 14th of 2020.
So let's suppose you're back on that day, right? And you could look forward in the future to October 30th, 2025. Would you be like, happy with your progress, disappointed, content? Like, what do if you knew the progress you made back then, what would your attitude be?
Gosh, I am thrilled with our progress. The genesis and I got this cute little video. I videoed my friend on this dumb little app we were using called Marco Polo at the time. We were really trying to connect during the pandemic, and I go, I'm inspired by all those people that came out and picked up the city after the George Floyd riot. So May 31st of 2020, there were stories where thousands of people came to downtown Seattle and cleaned up the broken glass, cleaned the graffiti, scraped up all the burned parts from the cop cars blowing up. I walked through. I didn't lift a finger, but I walked through, took a video, and I was like, wow, this is really inspiring. Who are all these people? And then 2 months later, so that was May, August, September, June, July, about 3 months later, I had my lightning bolt that went through me, and I sent my message to my friends, and I said, I want all those people to galvanize over the common cause of cleaning our city year round. I just need 100,000 people of our 800,000 population, and we're all going to go out and we're going to clean the city, all of us together, and we're going to do it. And that's what we did. And it took me about a month to start my first litter pick in Denny Park. And here we are 5 years later, and I would say we cleaned the city of Seattle. Congratulations, We Heart Seattle and our volunteers, being civic heroes to many, saving hundreds of lives, uplifting thousands, giving purpose to thousands of people, restoring our trails, and disrupting the conversation about what's working and what's not. I guess kind of from day one, I was like, whoa, what's needle exchange again? Because I was picking up bucket after bucket after bucket. So it didn't take me very long to start poking around about policy. I didn't think I would be such a lightning rod, but I think this is my calling, and I have the thick skin to handle it. And I'm put here for a reason. I think there's just something bigger at this point than me, and that's how service works.
So what do you see as a future of We Heart Seattle? Where do you see it going?
We're going to just keep going. We're going to inspire other cities to start. We just started We Heart Olympia. I could care less. In fact, I encourage people to steal the idea. There's no trademark on this. We Heart St. Louis. We Heart America. We Heart, Barcelona. Wherever you want to take civic engagement and stop waiting for the government. It's the old stop asking your country what they're doing for you, but what you can do for your country. I mean, what a timeless statement. That is exactly what we're doing. And I believe, staying noisy and at the front line at the City Hall dais. And, it would be, I'm a poor social worker now, paying for my own health insurance, and I don't have a 401k anymore. So, I kind of like the idea of bringing my work into like a deputy kind of position for a mayor, being a policy expert at the table, giving my point of view, whether it's through consulting, I've been called by Wenatchee and Yakima, like, what did you do again? What's happening over there? And I'm like, get your, like city leaders don't like to ask for help. Like, oh, I can't figure this out myself. Can you volunteers go out and clean before FIFA? And then the mayor gets all the hell pushed back because he asked volunteers to go abate graffiti instead of using city resources. And it's just like, come on, you guys. Volunteerism is how you ensure a well-ran government. You have to volunteer. It's been around since the beginning of time. Latin background means by choice. And we got to get back to that. Saving lives. First and foremost, too, you save lives through the mundane act of picking up trash, and you save your communities. So we've really kind of fallen on that is, why are we doing this again? To save lives.
Can you tell us like one success story you've had during this time?
Yeah, I'll talk about Vince. I'll leave you a little flyer here that we wrote a story about him, and there's hundreds of his story. But he was living in the West Duwamish Greenbelt near the Chinese Garden, right by the college over there. And we got a work order to come clean that Greenbelt. This was a few years ago, and we brought dozens of people, hundreds, if not thousands of hours to haul trash out of there. But we met Vince and his girlfriend, Erica, and they had cats. They had more garbage than you could see garbage as far as you could see the ocean. Needles were everywhere. We walked in, it was a small group at first, and asked, what's going on here? And he's like, me and my girlfriend live here. They had a lot of barriers as a couple with cats. She was trans. I mean, just like nothing worked for them in social services. So they lived in the park. And we started cleaning. They were down for it. We recharged their phones. They were in community with us. And eventually we cleaned it into its entirety. And Vince will tell you to this day, he's my weekly litter picker. Hi, Vince Rowland. That We Heart Seattle being out there and cleaning the park he destroyed was the catalyst that got him to think about his sobriety and getting into housing. And a mundane act of picking up trash seems selfish, like I just care about the environment or I just care about the trash, really has this transformative human element for a guy like Vince, who said, I was so ashamed to ever leave this park that I grew up in this condition that I could never see literally through the forest, right? So he was stuck. And now he's my neighbor in Belltown. He lives like literally 2 blocks away from me. And he's a regular litter picker. He's been on a ton of media hits with me. And he still struggles. His girlfriend still uses. But by and large, the catalyst, the intervention of that mundane act of cleaning his home cleared his brain, cleared his path. And that is what we are most proud of, is saving his life and then saving that community.
So next follow-up question. I don't use the word failure, but talk about instead where like maybe it didn't turn out like you thought it should.
Oh gosh, I have a lot of those too. And it's Vince keeps us going, right? Those are the stories that keep us going. Similar gentleman, KG, Somalian, beautiful human being, beautiful soul. And he's always hanging out in my neighborhood, smoking fentanyl, running the streets, hustling, selling stolen goods. Beautiful man. And he flagged me down, I don't know, a couple months ago. And he's like, hey, Andrea, hey, lady. I'm ready. I'm like, okay, we're going to go to Lakeside Milam, which is the city-funded pilot project. It's a $25,000 a month treatment program. And we got the assessment. Of course, there's always like these loose ends everybody's got to wrap up. But short story, we took him to treatment. Every week I met with him. He asked for a Quran. He asked for his vapor. We got him new shoes. We made him very comfortable. He had not seen his mom for 10 years. His mom came and visited. He was a brother of 12 siblings. His nieces and nephews came to visit him. This is a place in Kirkland called, again, Lakeside Milam. And he had put on 30 pounds. He was playing basketball. And he got out after 28 days and he called me and I said, let's take you to Battlefield Addiction. It's a recovery house. You'll live in community with other men and women in recovery. He stayed one night there, made a bunch of excuses, kind of got triggered. I picked him up and I took him to his sister's house and took a family photo. He had a room. He's always had a room at his sister's. The Somalian culture is like big families. They all share a house. And the next day after that, I saw him back where I found him just 30 days prior, and he was using, and he had a wad of cash in his hand. And I'm like, what happened? And he goes, I'm just, this is what I know. I'm just out here hustling. I have more loose ends. People owe me money, and I see him every other week. He's on 12th and Jackson. He's on 3rd and P. And every time I see him, we take a selfie. He smiles ear to ear. He tells me I'm an angel, that he wants to go back in. But all that work, and, think about families that feel burnt, parents. I mean, he had a mom. He has a mom. She came and visited him, but he has dozens of brothers and sisters. And he's like, I want to go back to Africa. He showed me pictures of him in his home country and his bride to be and all the things. And he's got a citizenship here. Everything's all copacetic. He's like, I just can't stay. I can't quit fentanyl. It's too easy to get high. It's too easy to steal. It's too easy to hustle. Seattle has removed the rock bottom to help and treat somebody like KG. We fail him by not arresting him for his crimes.
Do you ever think to yourself, man, what am I doing here? I could be at the house drinking margaritas, you know, traveling, you know, like, you know, I mean, a human has to go to your mind once in a while, right?
No, I mean, I'm 50 years old. I graduated from college early, worked my ass off all my 20s, my 30s. I worked for startups. I worked at a cannery. I traveled the world with my best friends. I got married. I traveled the world with my ex. We were a pandemic breakup. Spoiled. Single, no kids, double income. Traveled the world. Loved my local scene. My mother loved me so much. I was always hanging out with my parents in Oregon and just fun, carefree, not a worry in the world. And the pandemic hit, and that's when I got hit too with, I'm sick, I'm ready for, I got hit with my time was now. Mm-hmm. I'm good. I preloaded my life with, you know, my mom at some point were like, you know, I was like always on a honeymoon with my ex. I lived a very, very privileged and still do live a very privileged life. I've worked my ass off for it. I went, you know, paid for my college through scholarships. You know, I always hate when politicians give their fucking background. It's like, what are you going to do tomorrow to save my sister on the streets and my garbage on the, you know, keep my taxes low, get people back to school. But like, I was not, I spoiled myself. And so now, and I love this question is, when do I get burnt out? When do I get a taste of Bellevue? Frankly, I was there last week and I'm like, whoa, free parking, no ambulances, no fentanyl, no tents. It just, no grit, no theater, no sports. I mean, you know, there's the downside to the east side too. But spent some time with my parents last weekend in the Willamette Valley, you know, wine country just outside of Salem, beautiful in the country. One of my friends just bought a house up at Lake Forest Park. Again, beautiful rambler in the woods, out of town, still King County. But wow, you know, being in the suburbs is just a whole nother lifestyle. And I kind of don't want to get a taste of it, Jason. I'm like, ooh, somebody's like, you want to go to Hawaii or come down to Mexico? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to get a reminder of what it was like to not be what I'm doing now. But it's such important work, and why I know I have a calling, and it feels bigger than me. It's a service above self. It's, you know, Barack Obama talked about how important civic engagement and being grassroots, and meaning not with government, not always reliant on and dependent on being elected or being funded or being endorsed by this party or that party, but being grassroots just means going out and doing it ourselves. But it's like twice in a week I've been asked that question, because I was on John Curley this week earlier on Cairo, and he was like, aren't you, when you can say that you're ready to push the button and be like, all right, guys, we got it. We accomplished what we wanted to accomplish, which was we picked up the city of Seattle, we saved some lives, and we said we need a drastic change in policy. And I've taught that in 5 years, and I would die in peace tomorrow knowing that I served my purpose in this one life.
So what is your message for the people in the Seattle area?
My message to everyday people next door is you can do something very, very small that makes a transformative impact in your community. It catches on like wildfire in a very beautiful way. A stroke of the brush creates a masterpiece, right? And it's very rewarding. But if you want to save lives and save your community, you can make a difference. The power of one is the biggest underestimate in the world. So anybody can do it. And, you know, you read those books. Oh, you just gotta, you know, manifest it. And I'm like, yeah, you do. I think you do kind of manifest it. Things manifest, you know, The Secret. Remember that book? Oh, The Secret. It's like, oh, that's just a bunch of bullshit, you know? Yeah, you just put one foot in front of the other. And I didn't have a master plan, but you start building it as you go, and you look back and went, we built that.
So a follow-up question. What would be your message to the leaders of the Seattle area?
The message to the leaders in the Seattle area is, we got you. You know, reach out to all your resources. We shouldn't be like this with each other. You know, I try not to be disparaging towards, you know, people that are out there doing hard work and ran for office. It's really hard to do. Takes a lot of courage, but listen to your constituents. Come out and volunteer. You know, yes, you're in service. You are getting paid. Come out and learn by doing. I show elected leaders my little red bag. I didn't bring it today, but it's full of crack pipes and fentanyl foil and heroin cookers and tourniquets to do drugs, pipes and foil and cleaners to stick up your, you know what, to do drugs that way. And I show it to people and I'm like, do you know that this exists this way? And they're like, give me that. What? And I'm like, you guys got to get out on the ground. You got to get out on the ground and you got to start looking at everybody and hearing, you know, that there's a need for an expansion of approach. But yeah, Sarah Nelson's been out on litter picks, Ann Davidson, Kathy Moore, Bob Kettle, you know, governor candidate Mark Mullet came out with me. Ride along with your police officers, ride along with your fire, ride along with your volunteers, get involved with Rotary, get involved with church. Coalesce, all hands on deck. And something that I'm seeing in some of our I see it in our electeds and our people running for re-election is they get told a million different things about what to do, what to say. And it's too often, and I was guilty of it until I realized that's not who I am. But listen to your gut, listen to who you are and what your truth is and stand by it, because that's far more authentic. And what we want to see is somebody that speaks for the truth, not pandering to what might be blowback, or what might be blowback to maybe a PAC or a funder. If you don't truly believe in that, don't be bought.
So what are some of your favorite Seattle spots?
Favorite Seattle spots. Okay, I always tell everybody to jump on the ferry and take that cruise over to Bainbridge Island.
That's such a great view.
That's it, right?
It's
That's
so
it.
Great, yeah.
You get your chowder, you get your IPA, you get your, you know, while you're on your way over.
That's a great place.
Yep, and look back on the city. So you go over, it takes about 5 hours round trip. Give yourself the time, come back at sunset. I always tell people to go on that dang Wings Over Washington ride. It makes me cry every time you go on.
I haven't heard of that one. What
it's
is
right
that?
by the Ferris wheel. It's this like $15 little like fair ride. You go in and it's virtual and you like fly over the state of Washington and you see orca whales jumping and the hydroplanes and the mountains. And so depending on what you're flying over, you might get splashed with water or smell tulips from the tulip farms. And so it's a great way to see all of Washington in like 8 minutes. And then restaurant wise, I mean, check out Eat Seattle Tours to get a taste of Seattle, and find your danky hole in the wall bars.
There's so many of them here, right? So many great bars here.
Yeah. You know, get to know your locals, ask around, but catch a game if you're, you know, here for favorite thing I like to do when I was traveling around the world was, you know, go to a soccer game. Mariners are playing, catch a Mariners game, watch the Seahawks, the Storm, the Mariners. We have such a world-class city. It's just why I love it so much, and it's worth saving.
So how about some underrated spots that maybe people don't know about?
Gosh, the hidden gems. 5 Point, people kind of go there. 5 Point Cafe over in Tillicum Park is just rich with history, and they're open 24 hours, so that's always great. Retro restaurant between 2nd and 3rd on Stewart Street. It's got a whole bar full of music memorabilia. I absolutely love going there for the best burger in Seattle and the coldest beer. And what's another underestimate? Got to keep my Belltown people happy. For Italian, we got to go with Bar Cotto on 2nd Avenue. Give a shout out to Brandon.
So is there anything else I haven't asked you yet, or anything else you want to talk about?
Oh, gosh, how long have we been here?
Like almost 2.5 hours.
All right. I wish I had some audience participation. Anybody want to text in a question? Now, I think we've, you know, kind of covered it. Vote. Your ballots are in the mail. You know, they're due Tuesday by 8 p.m. And I believe we would be a completely different society if we had better turnout. And I just think that people underestimate the power of their vote.
So how can people reach out to you?
WeHeartSeattle.org. I'm Andrea Suarez. I'm the founder. I live in Belltown. I'm always available, but my best time to catch me is actually in the field at a litter pick. That's where you find me, is in the field. We did one today, 1 to 3, right here in Soto. We're really proud of the crews that come out midweek. Andrea at weheartseattle.org, and would love to hear from anybody listening. If you're inspired, want to get involved, if you want to make a donation, these platforms often lead to the next big thing. So what's going to be our next big thing?
Last thing, can you give us any advice on wisdom or anything you want to talk about?
My last piece of advice and wisdom is volunteering is the way you vote for the backyard you want to live. So if something's bothering you, I swear to God, the best way to do it is to do it yourself. Figure out a way to make it happen by yourself. Not vigilante, don't go crazy, don't break the law. But, if you want a stop sign at your 4-way stop sign because people keep buzzing 80 miles an hour, go to your city hall. Right. You do have to manifest it. And also you can get stop signs on Amazon.com.
Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you.
Okay, Jason, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Jason Cavanagh Experience. If you enjoyed this episode, take a minute to check out Cavanagh HR, our AI native HR system built for small business under 50 people. We're raising a refunder, and you can become an investor today at refunder.com/Cavanagh. And don't forget, you can download all 7 free ebooks inspired by our podcast guests at buildcavanaghhr.com/ebooks. They're full of real stories, lessons, and insights from founders and leaders who've been there. Thank you for your time.